So, in honor of Becky's retirement celebration with U.S. Soccer last week, we have a really special and honestly really unique guest this episode. Steve Swanson is going on 25 years as the women's soccer head coach at the University of Virginia, which just so happens to be where Becky Sauerbrunn played her college soccer. Steve has also been heavily involved with U.S. soccer at both the youth level, where he coached me to a U20 World Cup victory in 2012, and with the senior team, where he helped coach Becky and me together during the lead up to the 2019 World Cup. So I'm thinking Steve has some great memories of Becky and her journey to being the iconic leader of the U.S. women's national team. But I'm also thinking he has some funny stories about her. Steve, we're so happy to see you. Welcome to Good Vibes.
Well, thanks for having me. It's good to be here. Really good to be here. It's good to see you guys. So I miss you.
I know. We missed you too. I know Becky missed you. Did you guys just see each other though last week at the celebration?
We did.
Yes. It was good. She was busy. I was busy. That's for sure.
I was broadcast Becky for a lot of it.
Steve, I see you have the Ladue High School t-shirt on.
So funny story. when we recruited Becky, she came to Virginia, and she would very often, and this has not happened before or since, she would wear her high school shirt all the time. Ladue, Ladue, Ladue. And I thought that was amazing. You know, nobody, it's rare that they have that kind of spirit, but even as a fourth year, Becky would wear the Ladue High School shirt. So when I went back last week, I went to Ladue High School. I said, I got to get a shirt, you know? So I went down there, and this woman, I went there one day, and I met this really nice woman, Jen, and the store was closed. So I came back the next day, and she had me 5 or 6 shirts, a hat, everything. So it was great. And I wore it at the national team game. So
he made Sonnet put it on too.
I made Sonnet wear it as well. Yeah.
What an incredible commitment. Becky, what was your high school mascot?
The Ram.
The Ladue Rams. Steve, you mentioned, meeting Becky when she first came to UVA, when she was coming on her visits. Talk to us about your first impressions of Becky. When did you first meet her? And when did you know she was a special player and a special person?
I really appreciate you being on, because one of the ways, I was lucky enough to coach Becky on the youth national teams in college and with the full national team. And I feel very fortunate to have that experience. But I thought, when she retired, what's the best way to honor her? And I think the best way is to tell people, especially young players, what they can learn from Becky. I think there's so much there. As you know, Sam, she's a once in a generation type player. And so what can you learn? I think there's a lot to learn there, especially from a defensive standpoint.
I know. We're so lucky to have you, Steve. I can't wait to hear all about it. Becky, we're going to get to some of these things that Steve has clocked about you over the years and what he's learned and what he thinks young players should learn about you in your career. What was your first impression of Steve, and when did you know he was going to be an influential coach in your life?
So when I first got onto the youth national team and he was the coach, we were learning the flat back 4. So I had only played sweeper stopper, and he introduced this completely different way of defending. And so I had no idea what I was doing. And we were starting to actually record the training sessions and the scrimmages. And that was completely new. So he brought me into a meeting to go over film. And he was just kind of showing me all these clips of like, you're dropping too much here, like you're not with the line here. And I was thinking to myself the whole time, okay, well, this was a really fun, brief foray with the youth national team. It's been great. I'm just going to go back to Missouri and probably never see all these people again. But he was the first coach who had ever broken down film to show me how to defend. And it wasn't just about me defending. It was like my role within the back line and the team, and how as a center back, you can't just focus about yourself. Like if you want to be a center back, it's more about the line and how you lead the entire line. And so that's when I was like, okay, Steve completely changed the way that I'm learning about soccer. And that's when I was like, if he recruits me, I'll probably go to UVA.
I'm so interested in this kind of shared appreciation for defending. As somebody who really probably should have put more work into defending myself, I find it fascinating that Steve saw this kind of natural defensiveness in you, Becky, and that's actually really one of the things that made you so special. Steve, you've told me about how being so elite inside the 18-yard box is not only what wins world tournaments, but it's what set Becky apart from everybody else. So my question for you, Steve, as a coach and as Becky's coach, What did you see in her defensively? Why did you value her as a defender so much? And how did you identify and then come to teach her some of these defensive qualities?
Well, I think the first thing, and I'll go back to that first camp because I recalled a story in our first match with the under 16s back in, I think it was around 2001. We played an overage team. So it was a good team to play the under 16 national team with because you couldn't rely on your athleticism. You know, we were playing girls that were 2-3 years older than all of our players. And there's one particular player on the team. Her name was, I still remember her name, Candace Watkins. Wherever you are, Candace.
Shout out, Candace. You.
But Candace was very fast. This happened in the first 10 minutes of the game. Becky dropped like she was playing as a sweeper, which of course gave Candace more space, and she turned and just used her speed to go by Becky and score. And there are two things I remember about that. One is how much pride Becky took in her defending, which you don't see as much, I think, in general. I think more players should take great pride in their 1v1 defending, you know. And I think Becky, from that moment on, I think she understood, hey, this game demanded even more intensity, even more of dedication to the 1v1 individual. So that was the first thing. But the second thing was Becky had to come to grips with how can I deal with a player that might be faster than me? And, you know, the answer might not always be to drop. It might be to step in some cases, or it might be to deny a turn, even against a faster player, that, instead of getting them faced up. So it was, you know, it was those two things combined. I think she would probably say, wow, it's interesting you said what you said, Becky, that at the end of the camp, you thought you were towards the bottom. But in my opinion, she was the top player in the camp. But I think this is another thing that Becky does. You know, she's always humble, and she always looks at the ways she can get better. And so she was looking at it like, I have to get better. And she never took anything for granted. Becky is a great athlete. You know, she just wasn't blessed with exceptional sprinter speed. So she couldn't bail herself out of things like that, which is even more impressive from a defensive standpoint. How does she compete, and how has she won against the best teams and the best players in the world? And it's has to do with her experience, her brain, and her positioning.
Well, so speaking of that soccer brain, Steve, you told me a story in preparation for this podcast about an example you have of Becky using her soccer brain to maybe outsmart a player who was faster than her. Can you tell us that story?
We were playing a fun activation. You were probably there, Sam, at this. It was heading. I
was probably losing. I was probably being slow and stupid. You were in the other grid, maybe. But we were. It was in the year, the build up to the 2019 World Cup, and we were in France, where it was a small grid, and the players had to get from one side of the grid to the other. They had a penny in the back of their shorts, so the defender would come out. Yeah, a defender would come out, and the attacker would have to separate themselves from them, and the defender would try to pull the penny out before they reach the other side of the grid. I tell this story because Becky came up against Crystal Dunn, and as you know, Crystal is the most agile, athletic, explosive player on the team probably that year. I think she quickly realized that in this space, this is not my best. This is not what am I going to do to win? So she kind of made a couple fakes, tore up into her Mach 5, and then just as Crystal was going to grab the penny, she faked a hamstring injury. You know, she grabbed her hamstring, and Crystal, of course, being the sensitive, kind person she is, she stopped, and Becky just blew past her out the other side of the grid and won. So
yeah,
that was.
I am not surprised at all.
Crystal was very sweet to be worried about me. And just so you guys know, I have pulled that a few times, and it works almost every single time.
Because they trust you, Becky. You're ruining your trust. It's because they trust you. I think Becky, when she was playing this, you know, you're in the line and you see, okay, who am I going against? And I can tell you right now, Becky was doing this ahead of time. Okay, I'm going to go against Crystal. All right, what's my, you know, she's assessing herself, and she realized, okay, what's the way I can win this? This is the way I can win this. But this is how she played the game. Her brain is her greatest weapon. And I think it is any player's greatest weapon if they use it in the right ways. And she constantly is looking at the game. She knows what her strengths are, and she knows where her positioning needs to be in order to compensate for maybe if there's a difference in speed, if there's a space issue, and things like that make a difference in games. She looked at the situation, she assessed it, and she went in that game situation and she solved the problem in her own way, in a fun way. But I think that's the way she plays the game. And that's the reason why she's been such a success as a defender.
Well, I totally agree. I think the other thing about Becky that this calls to mind beyond just her soccer brain and her development of not only a defensive mindset, but how can I outsmart my opponent? How can I use what I am good at? And that's maybe my intellect. It's also about her winning mentality. And I have now conjured in my mind an image of Becky tackling Jalen Howell to the ground to win a silly drill in the U.S. Women's National Team camp. And Steve, I'm wondering if you can tell us how you saw Becky's will to win and winning mentality come out throughout her career.
Everywhere she's been, she's won. She's won. She's won in high school. She's won with her club team. She's won in college. She's won games at the pro level in 3 different leagues. She even won. I don't think you probably realize this, but she played for several months in Norway in the summer of 2009, and she won that championship with that team. And so there's, if you do all the research, you're going to see Becky's always won, and there's a reason for that. But what you're not going to see, and which I saw every day, was she won in training all the time. Like, there's no doubt if you could quantify all the times that she won in training, it would blow you away even more than her record, in matches and official games. So I think that had a lot to do with her focus. She was very focused in all her training sessions, and she was very consistent in that focus. I think every soccer training session for Becky was an education, and she's able to process those things and use those in the next training session and the next game and the next game. And I think she took the time to really understand the game, talk about the game. And I think that's helped her. I think her best asset is her ability to deny goals. And if you look at it, games are won on the soccer field by scoring goals. Games are also won by denying goals. And Becky did that. Becky did that in training all the time. And you saw that with what your example with Jalen Howell. I mean, those kinds of things happened all the time. And they win games.
Becky, as you hear us kind of praising you, one, I imagine that you're cringing inside and you do not want to be doing this at all.
Yes.
But all these things that we're talking about that really set you apart, your defensive prowess, your how much you value defending, your winning mentality, your soccer brain, are those things you think players can learn, or were you born with those traits?
No, they're absolutely things that you can learn. I think anything that can be improved upon can be trained. And so, talking about decision making, like Steve said, putting yourself in the positions to have to make those decisions. And I think what's really tough sometimes for players is being self-critical, like going back and watching the film. And that was something that I've really had to learn throughout my career, is like sometimes looking at the bad stuff is so much more beneficial than just looking at the good stuff. And so breaking down film, learning how to do that myself because of Steve, because he would sit me down, after a college game and say, we would pinpoint literally the footstep where I went wrong in a duel. And to be able to know that, to see that, to train that, then it becomes second nature. And so I really think a lot of that, absolutely, yes, can be trained.
For me, what always really epitomized Becky on top of all these other things was how good of a teammate she was. And luckily, I still kind of get to be her teammate. I say this all the time because we still work together. But Becky always really valued earning the respect from her teammates. And this idea of making sure she was never treated differently than anybody else based on her status as a national team player, her status in any other way. And Steve, I only have a couple more questions for you. So I'm curious how that character from Becky and that real desire to be the best teammate that she could be and always make sure things were fair, how did that get revealed to you as her coach? What would she do to make sure that she was always treated the same way as everybody else?
I remember listening to your podcast not too long ago, and you asked Becky when she officially announced her retirement what she was going to miss the most. And her answer was the locker room. And I think that's such a really good point. She's going to miss her teammates, and she's going to miss the camaraderie that goes on within teams. I remember a time Becky just joined a team in Boston for the summer, and she also got invited into a national team camp. Question was whether or not should she go to this game in Long Island from Boston, knowing that she was going to fly out the next day across the country to start national team camp. And I told her, I advised her, look, Becky, that your teammates are going to understand, you don't have to go to the game or anything like, but this is the way she is. She got on the bus, she drove 4 hours to Long Island. She got back at 4 a.m. and she took the flight at 7 a.m. And I'm sure cost her a little bit at the beginning of that camp, but she wanted to earn the respect of her new teammates. It was the first time. And I give her a lot of credit for that, So I think it's things like that. I also remember another time where she was in a national team camp, and I think she heard about a really tough fitness test that we did.
Becky, do you remember this?
Yeah.
She came back, and I couldn't believe it. She called me up and she goes, Steve, it's important that I do the test. I want to do the test. And I said, Becky, you probably did more than we did. It was an 8-hour time period for a week for our college team. You probably did way more. I said, you don't have to do this. She goes, no, I think it's important that I do this. And so without her teammates knowing, we met very early on a Saturday morning, and she did the fitness test. And it's that kind of commitment to her teammates that I think is it's what makes her unique. And I know you've seen it as well, Sam, but I think those kinds of things where you go above and beyond, you don't have to do that, but that's the difference between great players and good players.
I need to give some context about this fitness exercise because we called it Catch the Coach, and we start at the same corner of the field, but technically Steve is a lap ahead of me. So I need to make up the entire lap as he's also running. So I asked some of the players, I was like, okay, so what's of course I wanted to know.
Done it.
They'd already done it. So I wanted to know the strategy. And I think it was Alex Singer, who was one of the most fit players on the team, was like, oh, off the bat, just run as hard as you can. You'll catch up eventually. I was out in like 4 to 6 minutes. I was like, oh, that doesn't sound bad. That's a good idea. So I booked it the first lap, tired myself out completely. Steve is completely keeping pace with me. And so I'm like, I'm going to have to rethink this entire strategy. Steve, I think you made me run for, I don't know, like 25, 30 minutes. And then we did, I think, some 120s after as well, just to kind of like simulate
Steve's
extra time.
Fit.
What
Steve's
Becky,
so fit.
But what Becky back then, but Becky, what happened was I knew the strategy Becky had. So I knew that this was going around the team. So as we started this on this early morning, Becky went, I think you must have went 8 or 9 times around the field. And I did not let her get more than a yard ahead of me. And I think her strategy, you can imagine her strategy. And by the end, we must have gone around the field about 20 times. But I remember she was sprinting, she dove, and I sprinted away from her and I stopped. This would probably cause, it would be characterized as mental abuse. But again, she never quit. She did it till the very end. She could have easily just bowed out then, but she did it until her touching me was not a touch. She punched me in the back.
I do remember one time, full dive, trying to just like grab a little bit of his shirt and completely missed.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, this is all golden. I'm so glad I'm hearing all these stories. And I do know that Steve can be sometimes kind of a prankster. So I would just categorize this as mental trickery. And Steve, I know that there is one more story we're all happy with telling, I have heard. And it has to do with the drug test. And I'm wondering if we can tell that one as a way to wrap up this lovely walk down memory lane with Steve and Becky.
Yeah, I could tell that one. This is probably the first time in public, right, Becky, that we've gone there.
Yeah, probably.
The big reveal on Good Vibes FC.
We were in the middle of the NCAA tournament. And at that time you played 2 tournament games you played one on a Friday and you played one on a Sunday. So we had won the Friday game and we were kind of recovering and getting ready for the Sunday game. We were in the training room everybody's getting cool tubs and, doing recovery exercises. And I don't, to this day, I still don't know why it hit me this, but I saw Becky was done. She was standing there and there was a jar there that was next to me. And so out of the blue, I just said to my athletic trainer, Bill Parenti at the time, I said, Bill, go tell Becky that, because you have to have these drug tests at different times during the NCAA tournament. And so I said, Bill, go tell Becky that you've got to do a drug test, but tell her it's not a drug test like you normally do. It's number 2, it's number 2. So, and it was a bigger jar than normal. Yeah, stool sample. It was a bigger jar than normal. So I have to give our trainer credit, man. He went over there and he was like the best actor in the world. He said, Becky, I'm sorry. The NCAA has let us know that you have to do a drug test. But it's not your standard drug test. It's got to be a stool sample. And he gave her the jar, this big jar, and he left. and
a paper bag.
Becky,
and a paper bag.
What was going through your mind?
Well, the canister that he handed me looked completely legitimate. Like I think there were even like metrics on the side. And I was like, oh my God, they're going to measure the stool sample as well. Like, and so Bill Parenti, the athletic trainer, completely sold it, like Steve said. And I'm thinking, okay, like I haven't heard about this new drug test, but I really thought I had to do this.
We let her flap in the wind there for about 5 minutes. She literally sat there and looked at the jar for what seemed like 5 minutes. And then she came over to me and I said, I don't know what to do, but I don't know what to tell you, Becky. And there was a couple football games on in the training room. And I go, and by the way, Becky, the Cleveland Browns are playing. Did you notice that? And then I said, oh, look, number 2 caught a pass. And finally she got it. But it definitely was a good way to reduce the tension of the NCAA tournament in our players' eyes. It was funny.
Yeah, you guys got me for sure.
It sounds just like something Steve would do. Becky, can you help us wrap up here and maybe just explain a little bit more about your relationship with Steve? Why were these hijinks common? Why has your relationship kind of lasted at this level all of these years, such that he has so many amazing, wonderful things to say about you, accompanied by such funny stories?
I think it's just because that's how Steve coached. He cared so much more about the person than he did the actual soccer. The soccer was always important, but it was more important that you were a good person, that you took your studies seriously. So it was very much like a student athlete. But even when we were younger, he was always joking and he made the environment so welcoming. And it was already, stressful. You're 14, 15 going into this environment where you're already being evaluated on your performance, and it can be a lot. And so to have the coach, the person who's in charge of evaluating you, joking with you, making you feel more comfortable, it just really put people at ease. And that never changed. I think even with the senior team, at the highest level, on the most stressful platform and stage with the 2019 World Cup, he's still joking with people and he's still bringing those vibes. And so for me, having him as a coach, as a mentor, again, as coach, and now mentor and friend, like I feel very fortunate because he has made me the soccer player that I am, for sure. Like I owe so much to him, but also like the person that I am as well. Like he cared so much more about that. And how can you not just, admire and want that kind of person in your life?
Steve, do you have a parting message for either Becky or anybody listening? What do you want people to know about Becky and how you feel about her?
Women's soccer is such a young sport. It hasn't been around that long. And there are just a few once in a generation type players, especially defenders. I think Carla Worden Overbeck is one that Becky, I think, looked up to when she was young. She was one that didn't get enough credit for, I think, the success of that team. And I think Becky, she's just a reason why teams win a lot, and a lot of the things she does go undetected or unnoticed to the average fan. But I do think what's been neat to see is how much appreciation the fans have given Becky over the years. And I think it's because of the way she, not just the way that she played the game, but the way she approached the game. She's always an honest player. You know what you're going to get from her game in and game out. And, I think those are your best professionals, the ones that, hey, this is what I can expect every game out. And I think the fans got that every time Becky stepped on the field. And it's a tribute to her to do it for so long at the highest level. I hope that young players really look at her career and know that they don't have to be the fastest, the tallest, to play the game and to play it at such a high level. And, I think the physical attributes are one thing, but there's so much more that goes into making a soccer player. And I think Becky has some qualities that are worth looking at. So. And Sam, you do too. I have a bunch of stories we could talk about you too.
We'll have you back sometime.
We'll save that for another day.
Save that for another day. Steve, this was really special. Thank you so much for coming on. I just want to add something you said, Steve, was that teams that have Becky on them tend to win more. So I am feeling particularly lucky that I still get to be Becky's teammate. Like I said before, it sounds like the women's game is going to continue winning.